New details emerging after the FBI stormed the private home of former President Donald Trump. The raid reportedly over an investigation into classified documents. Right. A source says agents looked at every single office, safe, and grabbed documents in boxes, and they were not being judicious about what they took. We are also learning that Trump's team voluntarily turned over 15 boxes to the government way back in January. And the former president's lawyers had a meeting with investigators in June over the issue. But they still decided to raid his place anyway. Trump coming out swinging over what happened, saying, quote, "It's a prosecutorial misconduct, the weaponization of the justice system, and an attack by radical left Democrats."
Okay, so this is wild. The videos are everywhere. Trump loses it as judge seizes Mar-a-Lago control. Federal judge takes complete operational control of Mar-a-Lago. Trump needs permission to enter his own home. And the thumbnails are insane. Mar-a-Lago with caution tape. Judges with gavels, Trump looking panicked, and people are sharing these thinking, oh my God, finally. A judge actually took Mar-a-Lago away from Trump. He lost his own property. His fate is sealed. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin.
Or not. And you go after your political foes, I think that's wrong.
The FBI, when it comes to Trump, has lost their way. This unending desire to destroy Trump and his family is frustrating.
And the White House doesn't want to talk about it.
Is this administration weaponizing the Justice Department and the FBI against political opponents?
Peter, the president believes in the rule of law. The president believes in the independence of the Department of Justice.
That's a yes or no? Just
no,
is
that
the
is
White House.
no. It's a yes or a no for you. I'm answering the question. You may not like it.
Here's what you need to know right up front. No real judge has seized full operational control of Mar-a-Lago. Trump doesn't need permission to enter his own home. There's no court-appointed receiver running the property. That specific scenario, the one where a federal judge signs an order taking complete control away from Trump. That's fiction, like literally AI-generated fiction. These videos have descriptions that explicitly say this scenario is entirely fictional and AI-generated. But here's where it gets interesting. Just because this specific dramatic seizure didn't happen doesn't mean nothing's going on, because what's actually happening is courts have already used, or seriously considered, really powerful tools to control Trump's businesses. Tools like receiverships, tools like independent monitors, tools that could, in theory, strip Trump of day-to-day control over flagship properties, including potentially Mar-a-Lago. So when you see headlines about judges seizing Mar-a-Lago control, what that's really describing is this possibility, this legal tool that exists, that courts have threatened to use, that could be deployed if Trump's fraud or contempt gets severe enough. Not something that already happened, but something that could happen, and that Trump's probably terrified of. Let me explain what a receivership actually is, because this is important for understanding what's real versus what's fiction. A receivership is when a court appoints someone, called a receiver, to take control of a business or property, and the receiver makes decisions, controls operations, manages finances, and the owner, the person who used to control it, they can't do anything without the receiver's approval. They don't get access to the money. They don't make decisions. They're essentially sidelined from their own business or property. And courts use receiverships when they think an owner can't be trusted, when there's fraud, when there's mismanagement, when someone's shown they'll abuse their control if left to their own devices. It's one of the harshest civil remedies a court can impose, short of actually seizing the property outright, because you still technically own it, but you don't control it. Someone else does. And that someone answers to the court, not to you. And in Trump's civil fraud case in New York, Judge Engoron actually discussed receivership. He gave both sides until a certain date to submit names of potential receivers, and he imposed an independent monitor, a retired judge named Barbara Jones, who oversees Trump Organization operations, who has to approve major decisions, who reports to the court. So Trump's already living under court supervision, already has someone watching his business, making sure he's not committing more fraud. And legal analysts have said if the fraud is severe enough, if Trump keeps violating orders, if he shows he can't be trusted even with a monitor, courts could go further could appoint a full receiver, could take operational control away from Trump, could require him to get permission for decisions about his own properties, and that could theoretically include Mar-a-Lago if it's tied up in fraud findings. If it's part of the business entities the court is supervising. So the fictional videos, they're taking this real possibility, this real legal tool, and dramatizing it into a scenario where it's already happened, where a judge has already appointed a receiver, where Trump's already lost control, where he needs permission to enter his own home. But in reality, we're at the stage where receivership is threatened, discussed, considered, not yet imposed, at least not to that extent. And Trump's response to even the threat of receivership, he's furious. He attacks the judges. He calls it unconstitutional. He claims it's persecution. He says they're trying to destroy him because losing control of properties like Mar-a-Lago, that's not just financial, that's symbolic. Mar-a-Lago is Trump's brand, his image, his power base. It's where he holds events, where he raises money, where he projects strength. And if a court took control of it, if he had to ask permission to use his own property, that would be devastating, not just practically, but to his whole identity. So when you see videos about judges seizing Mar-a-Lago control, don't think it already happened, but don't dismiss it as completely fake either. The legal tool exists. Courts have threatened to use it. And if Trump keeps pushing, keeps committing fraud, keeps violating orders, it could actually happen. And understanding that, understanding the difference between what's happened and what could happen, that's important for knowing what's really at stake in Trump's legal battles. All right, let's dig into exactly what's happening with Mar-a-Lago and court control, because I want you to understand the real legal mechanisms, the real cases, and the real possibility that Trump could lose control of his flagship property, not through fiction, but through actual court proceedings. So first, let's talk about the New York civil fraud case, because this is where receivership and court supervision have been most seriously discussed. Judge Engoron found that Trump committed fraud, that he inflated asset values, that he lied on financial statements, and part of his ruling included discussing receivership, appointing someone to take control of Trump Organization operations to make sure the fraud doesn't continue. And Engoron didn't just discuss it theoretically, he gave both sides a deadline to submit names of potential receivers. He was seriously considering it. Ultimately, he went with a slightly less extreme option, an independent monitor, Barbara Jones, a retired federal judge who has broad authority to oversee Trump Organization operations, who gets access to financial records, who has to approve major transactions, who reports regularly to the court. And this monitor, this is real court control, maybe not as dramatic as a full receiver who runs everything, but it's still a court-appointed official with power over Trump's business. Trump can't just do whatever he wants anymore. He has to go through the monitor, has to get approval, has to prove he's complying with court orders. And if he doesn't, the monitor reports to the judge, and the judge can escalate, can impose harsher restrictions, can move toward full receivership if necessary. Now, how does this relate to Mar-a-Lago specifically? Well, Mar-a-Lago is part of the Trump Organization. It's one of his flagship properties. And if a court decides the Trump Organization can't be trusted, that it needs a receiver to prevent continued fraud, then that receiver would have authority over all Trump Organization properties, including Mar-a-Lago. So even though the fraud case is about financial statements, about New York properties primarily, the court supervision extends to the whole organization, which includes Mar-a-Lago. And here's why that matters. Mar-a-Lago isn't just a property. It's Trump's residence, his club, his event venue, his political headquarters, essentially. It's where he meets with supporters, where he raises money, where he projects power and influence. And if a court-appointed receiver has authority over it, that means Trump doesn't have unfettered control anymore, doesn't get to make all the decisions, has to answer to someone who answers to a court. Second, let's talk about the classified documents case, because this is another Mar-a-Lago legal battle, though it's different from the receivership question. In 2022, the FBI searched Mar-a-Lago, looking for classified documents Trump wasn't supposed to have. They found boxes of them, classified material, presidential records, stuff that should have been turned over to the National Archives. And Trump fought this. He went to court trying to get a special master appointed, someone who would review the documents before prosecutors could use them. And initially, he won. Judge Aileen Cannon, A Trump-appointed judge granted his request, appointed a special master, slowed down the investigation. But then the appeals court stepped in. They reversed Cannon's decision. They said no, this special master appointment was wrong. The Justice Department can have the documents, and they dismissed Trump's entire lawsuit. So this wasn't about control of Mar-a-Lago as a property, but it was about courts overruling Trump's attempts to shield what happened at Mar-a-Lago, to prevent investigation of his conduct there. And it showed that even though Trump had a friendly judge, the broader judicial system wasn't going to let him use procedural tricks to avoid accountability. The appeals court shut down his strategy, made clear that Mar-a-Lago and what Trump did there with classified documents, that's subject to legal scrutiny and consequences. Third, the broader question of receivership as a remedy. Let me explain how this actually works legally, because it's not something courts do lightly. Appointing a receiver, taking control away from an owner, that's extreme. It's usually reserved for situations where there's proven fraud, mismanagement, risk of assets being hidden or destroyed, ongoing harm that can't be stopped any other way. And the receiver's job is to protect the assets, to prevent further fraud, to make sure the property or business is managed properly while legal issues get resolved.